know everybody's very busy.
Sure, absolutely.
So let's go ahead and begin the School Safety Subcabinet meeting of December 16th. We do not have a quorum. We are waiting for a quorum, but we're going to begin with safety updates.
Good morning, everyone. So very quickly, the annual report that you saw at the last meeting has been submitted to Department of Education Liaison, Legislative Services. So we're waiting for that to actually get submitted. And once it is, we'll email out the final copy to everyone. We did make the corrections that were requested. So we'll get that out to the subcabinet and the advisory board as soon as we confirm. Just a quick update on regulations. So we had some challenges over the summer with the system where we were entering the regulations because we were technically a new independent agency within the regulation section, or the subcabinet is. We had some finagling to do with getting them in correctly. They wanted it in a very specific format, so we had to make some changes to how that was done. Nothing except sort of the way the content was organized. So we finally did that. We have 5 that are out for public comment, that are open. They're in the Maryland Register as well as on our website. There is one that we pulled that we're going to have to bring back to you for comment. We had to redraft it, and that was for the use of force. So we had some, after the conversation with the Colonel at the August subcabinet meeting, I had additional conversations with local law enforcement agencies as well as the local school systems to sort of refine the use of force draft regulations. So we'll resubmit those to you in the early new year. We can't submit any new regulations between January and April during the legislative session, but we'll get those drafts to you, and this way we'll get them out and get them correct the first time around. Any questions on the regulations or the report? So the use of force reporting form, this is the first year we're going to have to collect that data. So again, after those conversations with our local law enforcement agencies as well as local school systems, we have put together some preliminary guidelines for submitting that report. We've also developed a template for them to submit that information to us. Again, when we show you the draft regulations, we'll provide you both. We do think that this first year of data collection, will be an opportunity for us to be able to refine those regulations. Just in the event there's, we capture either from school systems or local law enforcement any additional confusion between the language and what data they actually have available to submit to us. Any questions on that? All right, understanding the SRO is in development. They're actually developing, they finalized the objectives and they're developing the lesson plans, so that'll be fantastic. So as a reminder for you all, that is the about a 4-hour training that'll be available for SRO supervisors as well as administrators to understand really what the role of the SROs in their schools are. The other exciting thing on the training front is we are the team is putting together some pretty comprehensive and exciting video training. So very short, under 10 minutes, and even 5 minutes in some cases. We have a bunch of things we're talking about. We're doing regional staff introductions. We're doing a video on restorative practices. We're doing another video on autism. We're doing another one on the SROs and their jobs, and we're going to do some spotlights of SROs in the different school systems. So some pretty exciting stuff. All of that should be rolling out within the first couple of months of the new year.
Great.
Yeah.
Kate, I was wondering, when you get close to the end that you want to share the outline of the training or whatever with superintendents, I'd like to get you on the PZAM agenda.
Absolutely.
To present that to superintendents, just so they have a heads up that it's coming.
Sure.
And since they asked for it, I think it would be good to get back, loop back with them.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We'll do that.
Kate?
Yes, sir.
The video training, is that online? Or is
It will be. So we'll have that available up on our website. Yeah.
Is Emily doing her famous characters and everything?
So no, this time they're actual live people.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we're actually going
As opposed to
to have,
actual dead people?
Yeah.
well, as opposed to the
Legos.
Oh, Legos.
Yeah, remember.
So the tip line
Oh,
video
yeah,
with the
yeah, yeah.
Legos.
I was going to suggest that you use Gumby. in the next one.
So speaking of the
He's
tip
coming back,
line,
by the way.
Yeah.
He's emerging
I've
again
heard
in the
that.
toy market. Just thought I'd share that in case anybody wanted to.
It shows you every 50 or 60 years.
he's
things come back
the
around.
hot item this year.
Yeah.
Don't be.
So on that tip line video, so Emily and Sandy were at the Maryland Association of Student Council's leadership meeting this past Saturday. So they were able to do a full training of all of the students
Oh, great.
that were there on the tip line, as well as gather some really good marketing ideas from
Good.
them on how we can kind of get it out more to the students.
Very good.
So,
Thank
yeah,
you.
some exciting stuff.
Yeah.
So that is it on the updates. The next one, the SRO Adequate Coverage Grant, that is actually a decision for the subcabinet, so I don't know if you want to hold on
Yeah, I
that.
guess we better do that.
And the
That was
grants?
discussion we had last time as a Q set for today, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't need enough people to vote on that.
So in their absence, I know that the last agenda topic related to emergency planning and drills is not a decision topic, just a discussion. But I know Bill Fields is the one that requested that, so I don't know if you want to wait
We
a
can
few
watch the
minutes.
video if he doesn't make it.
That's true.
that's why
So
we've got
would you
this.
like me to introduce our guests?
I
And
think it
we're
would be
going
great,
to,
because I don't want to hang them up
Yeah.
as well, and I know they have a day planned with their jobs, so.
Yes.
Let's do that.
all right, so I'll introduce you guys. You can come on up. We've got some seats on this side, so I apologize. We're fast forwarding a bit. So from the Department of Education, we have Dr. Walt Saley and we have Dr. Ron Brown. From the Maryland Institute of Emergency Medical Services Systems, or MIMS, did I say that right, Randy?
Yes.
It's like the longest acronym in the state. We have Randy Linthicum. And then from the Maryland State Police, we have Sergeant Travis Nelson, and both Randy and Travis are the co-chairs of the Active Assailant Interdisciplinary Work Group. So in the back, behind the grants of your packet, we've got a few things. They begin on this page, so you'll see the page from the emergency planning guidelines, and then you'll see a letter from the AAIWG, or the Active Assailant Work Group, as well as a letter from the NGA. So, Dr. Sam, would you like me to sort of explain why we're having this discussion, or do you want
Yes, no, I think, certainly you have the expertise more so than I, but I did share the concern because I've been hearing it a lot during my school visits around the state. I visit all 24 school systems every year, and I've been hearing it from, mostly principals, some superintendents, that they were concerned with the drills and the trauma that might come from just drilling on both teachers and students. And then it struck me, and I forget who said this to me, but I think it's very indicative of where we are right now. They said, we are training kids, and most of the shootings that happen are with children in their schools, and yet we're training them with all the protocols. And that's where the incident, if you remember, of the huge shooting in Florida with pulling the fire drill and getting the kids outside. So those are the kind of things that started me to think, are we going overboard in this area? And then certainly Bill had brought up the article with Kate and I a couple of months ago, and I said it's really worth having this conversation. So then you can fill in the rest.
Sure. So there's a lot of things going on in the state, not just with the Center for School Safety, but the Department of Education this year, December 1st, had to update their emergency planning guidelines. Those were done in collaboration with the center and the local school systems, who did some evaluations of all of their public schools this summer, as well as their planning guidelines. So they're here to speak to the changes this year in the update, which I think has been 2 years in coming.
Yep.
The last update was 2017.
Yep.
And then, of course, the good work that the Active Assailant Interdisciplinary Work Group has been doing. Again, I'll let them explain sort of what the group is, what the makeup is, and what they're doing as we move forward. So you all want to start and
Sure.
speak to the guidelines?
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about our updates to our emergency plans today. We'll talk about the update of the guidelines for local school systems and schools that we publish. In 2017, Kate, like you said, there was an update to the guidelines. That was the last update before this one, and that was specifically to address the needs of students, staff, and visitors with disabilities, and how to evacuate students safely. and some of the folks in this room were actually on that committee and helped with the input of that guidance, so thank you for that. And in 2018, due to the Maryland Safe to Learn Act, we are here again to update a little bit more with what's happening to keep current the guidelines. Our goal is to always keep it current, to keep it fluid, to make sure that we are capturing everything in real time and making sure that they are the most up-to-date that they can possibly be. So with that, we are working on a final draft. It's still working on some final details of that, but Ron is here. Dr. Ron Brown is here to give an update on some of the changes that we have so far based on the collaborative work that we've done.
Sure, Ron. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I want to start off by thanking Ron Pierce, Jason Stoddard, and several other consultants throughout the state who helped me with this. Big take on. But the goal of this document and the updates was to infuse language basically from 1265, the Safe to Learn Act. We felt like that was important to take us from where we were to where we are. But not only that, what was important was to strategically place the language in the document that was already well written. So I feel like we've done that. The first thing we did was we added an executive summary. That's something that didn't exist in the last version. We kind of wanted it to serve as an abstract, telling us what the document's about, what changes we've made. I infused excerpts from Educational Article 7510 per Kate's request. I think it flowed well. It also talks about the recommendation with the behavior threat assessment, emergency events, accommodations to students with disability. From there, we go on to add an introduction. If you're familiar with the last document, it talks about other tragedies across the country. I think Sandy Hook, Columbine, but I felt it was important to mention our own tragedy because we feel like that promulgated much of what the Safe to Learn Act was about. So we've mentioned that throughout the document, along with some key provisions from the Maryland Safe to Learn Act. Then we go on down to section 1. I credit Ron with this. We talked about going back to the basics with criminal justice, talking about crime prevention, SEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design. If you're familiar with criminal justice, that's a basic concept. And why I feel that's important when I was adding it was for those local school systems who have a low budget, it's basic. It's just about defensible space. It's about creating a design within the school where it's not becoming to criminal activity. So I felt that was important to mention. It took me way back. So we did do that. We talked about each component of crime prevention through environmental design early on in the document, which we felt like it's a good foundation to start with. Because again, we talk about, we see a lot of our local school systems across the state doing vestibules. That's a concept of crime by environmental design, and it's economically feasible. Let's see. Going into, we place additional emphasis on, of course, the safety evaluations that are a requirement of 1265. We go on to kind of expand language to talk about the recommendations we found as a result of those evaluations. To your point, Dr. Salmon, we talked about, we added language about standard response protocol. And what that is, and I think Kate and we all talked about this in our preliminary meeting, is that focuses on more so the drill than the actual scenario. We think this will help mitigate actually the trauma associated with the children. When you focus more on the drills, it tends to offset the actual situation. I think Kate used an excellent example when she talked about fire drills. We don't set a fire to drill the kids. We just say this is the standard response and this is the way we're going to approach it. I think we focus more on the response, then we'll have less trauma. So
that's a good point. Although I still remember being under my desk in elementary school,
Absolutely.
ducking and
Duck and
covering.
cover.
Absolutely.
And guess what? That would have not really helped us during that Cold War experience, but we felt safe, didn't we?
Sure.
You all weren't born yet, but.
Again, I know we updated the disability section the last go around in 2017, but I felt like it was important to expand that language as well, and we did so by just discussing modification to students' educational plans, particularly in schools like Ivy Mount, the level 5 schools, where if coming from a school psychologist perspective, those modifications are necessary for kids who may not be able to respond to standard language. So we discussed that a bit. I added a visual of the safe and sound school summary of developmental levels and safety awareness was added to demonstrate the level of competency students possess at various developmental levels in K through 12. I felt like this was a critical piece because again, coming from a school psychologist perspective and a developmental perspective, if you understand kids, they take on things at different rates. A 3-year-old may not address, may address the situation differently from a 6-year-old. Sorry. So I just felt like it was important to add that. No updates in section 2. In section 3, again, we infused a lot of language from the Safe to Learn Act, strategically, of course. We expanded language on behavior threat assessment. Well, we added language on behavior threat assessment. We made reference to the behavior threat assessment model policy. There's a link to the Safe Schools website. Expanding language in the area of debriefing in the Maryland Safe to Learn Act requirement of the after action claims. We felt like this was important, particularly with the role, the requirement of the mental health coordinators. I think one of the things we were lacking on the back end was, and I think we're still lacking, but we're getting better at, is that addressing the post-tragedy. One of the things I learned just being a part of the Great Mills situation was when we were there on the post-end, it was necessary. And they pulled it together, but I felt like it was important to add that within the document. I think that's it. Sorry if I breezed through it, but I think that's pretty much it. Like I said, we already had a pretty robust document, and we didn't want to compromise the integrity of it at all.
Yeah, and one thing I'll just add with regard to drills, and we've had some of this preliminary discussion, is that the document itself does not Band-Aid drills and that sort of thing, but we did include some things that we should think about when we are conducting drills. And some of those things are included in there, the age of the student, disability status, and those types of things, and how they can be modified or differentiated based on those types of factors.
Randy and Travis, do you want to talk a little bit about the work group itself, and then sort of where you're going as it relates to, especially the training and exercise side?
Sure, absolutely. So if you haven't heard, the Maryland Active Assailant Interdisciplinary Work Group actually was formed following the DC Navy Yard shooting in 2013. The primary focus at that point was bridging the gap between first responders, EMS, and law enforcement in particular, mostly due to the complex response to the Navy Yard and how there were some issues there. So in 2014, we produced guidelines for first responders at that point, and we kind of did some additional monitoring of incidents after that. However, there wasn't a whole lot of action taken. Following the Parkland school shooting, much with that came in orchestra with a lot of the Center for School Safety expansion and updates. The governor's office, Governor Hogan signed an executive order to call the group back together to not just update those first responder guidelines, but also to take a more comprehensive approach on prevention, preparedness, and a whole community type of look to this. So with that, we already had a pretty large membership of various local law enforcement, first responder, emergency management personnel. We expanded that membership to through the executive order partially, and then through the collaboration of the group to include MSDE, the Center for School Safety. Well, actually, they were already a member, but Department of Health and some others, specifically because they and the Maryland Department of Disability. Sorry, I'm just seeing things and remembering all these people that are now in the group. But really, it was because of that. A lot of these areas represent the larger population that we need to hear from. So now we even have an even larger membership, which comes with its own challenges. But we really structured it much more formally with a charter, so we knew exactly who should be speaking and where a quorum was, and then we broke that into subcommittees. So because our mission is so broad. There's focused subcommittees that include training and exercise, for example, planning and preparedness, the integrated response, EMS focused areas. So you didn't have folks from maybe MSDE and an EMS protocol group that wasn't really necessary. So those subcommittees have been working on objectives that are outlined in a work plan that we can certainly provide, but to focus on training and exercise, which is the primary reason we're here today, is really been probably, so let me take one quick step back, is when we started in 2013, there was very little guidance, there was very little documents from the federal government or from other jurisdictions that were really that helpful. From 2014 to now, you know, the Department of Homeland Security alone has several different guidance documents, and there's the amount of information, the amount of training programs that have developed through lessons learned, and very valid and good programs that have developed in the last 5 or 6 years has just been huge. So the training and exercise group has really got to take a look and see what are these training programs that are being used already in the state that whether the federal government or private sector or whoever schools are recommending, and then where are the consistencies? What will work for Maryland, and then what should we be kind of endorsing? So not to take all the thunder from Randy as well, but I'll kind of just bring a little bit of attention to the document that we prepared, which I know is a little crowded, so certainly don't expect you to read through that right away. But just to introduce you to the document, the reason that we kind of formatted it this way is we read a lot of after-action reports, like a lot of them. And they're very long and kind of, they're great for right before bed. So when we kind of challenged some of our research team to do is, you know, I was thinking to myself, how can we kind of make this better? And we were kind of bouncing ideas off of each other. So right now, everybody's Christmas shopping. You look at Amazon, and when you look at Amazon, you look at a product, for example, Amazon, anywhere else, and you're looking at the reviews. You want to see the top positive review, the top negative review, and then just the general feel. And I said, you know, it'd be great if our research team could give us the same sort of information. So that's kind of how we structured this based on the questions that Kate provided was, you know, what is really the top positive thing that came out, the top negative that came out of these questions with some additional detail to make available so we're not kind of overwhelming you with information. So to just kind of provide a summary, the most common, and then Randy will talk about kind of the direction that we're heading with training and exercise. The most common problem that we see across the board is exercising without planning or training. So we are really advocating every time that we go out the POETI model, which is planning, organizing, equipping, training, and exercising before they ever get to that full-scale exercise. Unfortunately, it's not usually the most appealing thing. You know, people get really excited about, you know, doing these exercises and then but not so excited about putting pen to paper and actually writing a plan and then educating the staff on the plan. So that is where we're seeing a huge deficiency is the lack of proper planning and training before they come and they seek grant funding through the State Homeland Security grant or other grants that are available for equipment and then training. So that's the breakdown there. And then just to kind of summarize, you know, in agreeing with Dr. Brown, we do not have any research or anything to show that, you know, kind of putting students into a real life or staff into a real life exercise with, you know, all of the graphic nature of it is a direct correlation to them having a better response. We do have good data to prove that if we train them, that they're going to have a better response as great mills. So they exercise their reunification, and as a result of that, their reunification went very well right here in Maryland. The problem, though, is that, well, I want to say the problem is that, you know, a lot of times first responders benefit a lot more from those realistic environments. So a lot of times schools and private sectors reach directly out to local law enforcement for assistance, and they say they want to do a drill. they're excited about the drill because they've already been trained and planned, and that gives them an opportunity to work in the environment, and that's how they learn better, is those realistic scenarios. But for non-response oriented personnel, it may not be necessary, especially with the side effect of, the psychological impact, especially with those with disabilities or other intellectual, developmental disorders. So one of the things that we are advocating is, yes, you should train, but kind of the same way as you don't set the school on fire. Everybody can learn how to do CPR without Randy collapsing in cardiac arrest and working on him. So we can still get a lot of benefit out of simple training and then going through the motions without probably all of the extra added effect of the stress. Good for first responders, maybe not so necessary for everybody else. So
just a question,
sorry.
when you look at that information, my vision of that would be having schools available on weekends or times when students aren't in the building. I think that's something we should really start to define, and I know you all really are the folks that will do that, and then we'll take it from you. But I hope that that's the design, so that we can lay out, so that people don't get overzealous about this, and lay out this thing of what it means to train versus what it means to enact something with, the whole scenario, just so we differentiate that. Because that, to me, is, I certainly think we should make the environment available, but having the students there, to me, is just, as you point out, counterproductive and gets us into situations that we don't want to be in.
Sure, and I think, sometimes success is poorly measured by how realistic a drill is.
Right.
So, they think, oh, this was very, very lifelike, that was a successful drill. Not as much objective focused on what were the actual objectives that we were trying to focus in on, which, again, is a big breakdown when they do these exercises, is they throw this scenario, but they're not really measuring, objective-based success. So they may have done really well at the police doing the initial response, but never actually tested where we're really seeing our challenges, which is, communication back to the parents and to the family, family reunification, and mental health support. Again, before Randy kind of gets into our pathway forward with that, is we really are trying to communicate to the larger audience that these are not typically mass casualty incidents. A lot of times they don't even reach the level of mass casualty. But the community impact and the emergency management and the overall incident is where we really need to get better to try to minimize that time of incident response and just really focus on recovery and then hopefully be recovered faster. So did you want to? I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I want to go back to the duck and cover thing, because I lived less than a half a mile from a missile base. My little 3-room elementary school was here, and then it had a Nike missile base a half mile down the road. So, and every once in a while they fire off ones that got your undivided attention. But I don't know why, at least from the children's standpoint, this just can't be emergency training just the way it is for fire drill, or getting off the bus if the bus is disabled, and it's just emergency training. And basically from the school, it's listening to your teacher, going to the designated place, and you can time and measure and do all that without, when I read this the first time, I'm thinking about, they do something at the airport once every so often where they train for a plane crash, and they have real fake casualties, and it's aggregating the ambulances and getting everything done. I don't think we got to go that far. If we can just get people to listen up and go to the places that are designated and listen to the teacher and do what you're supposed to do, I think that's as far as you need to go. The professionals are going to have to drill and drill and drill until they get it right, but I don't think you need to involve the student body in all this.
Yeah.
So.
I think why it morphed this way, and I'm just looking, thinking from what I've been reading, it's more of the older students who are very concerned and want to be very proactive in their schools, and so some of the high schools have been, they involve the kids and it's more of a big deal. But I totally agree with you, Senator. And I think that, we just don't want to get to the point where these incidents become the focus of our educational program. These incidents happen in seconds, absolutely seconds. And, if we're spending 4 times a year in a half-day drill, to me, that's certainly over the top and certainly not appropriate. We need to think about that. And just to give you an example of where we need to really focus on the mental health aspect and the afterward of these events. I was just visiting St. Mary's County a couple weeks ago, and the superintendent was sharing with me that staff there is still in mental health treatment, the first responders. And so that's where we need to really, in my opinion, focus our efforts. None of us, at least many of us, cannot imagine what that impact is when you are a first responder in that situation. So I totally agree with your comment.
Thanks. Just to sum up, Sergeant Nelson mentioned the work plan and some of the activities and where we're headed. We have a couple subcommittees that are working on training and exercises. They're summarized on the back page of the handout. Basically, we have one that is going to review training programs and identify best practices. We're looking at training programs for all disciplines, including schools. We're going to compile a list of active assailant-related training programs, organized again by target audience. That'll include things like ALICE for schools, research, and compile best practices and examples of active assailant-focused exercises. And then working with the planning and preparedness and training and exercise committees, those two together, review and catalog resources available for non-first responder audiences. So we're going to take a look at all of those, try to identify best practices, catalog them, and make them available to everyone across the state.
And so I'll just say, we talked a little bit about there are different pieces, right? So there is the tactical response training that the first responders need, right? And they may need people to be actors in those situations, to pretend to be victims. That is different. So when you participate as an actor, you go in, you sign a piece of paper, you say you understand what you're going to be going through, you agree to potentially get moulaged or stage makeup to make you look like a victim in those scenarios. And that's very important for the tactical, and to Dr. Salmon's point, doing that on the weekends and after hours in the school where an event may take place is beneficial, and it's beneficial for the first responders. But now let's talk about the kids and the students and even the staff, quite frankly. So to the sergeant's point, the progression of exercising is one of the biggest failures when people exercise. So they forget to write a plan, or they don't train on the plan that they've written. Then when they start to design an exercise, the first thing they say is, we're going to have an active assailant exercise. We are going to have a fire drill. We are going to have a hurricane drill or a tornado drill. Instead of saying, what do we want to test? What are the objectives we want to test? What are the capabilities? Again, someone over, I think Travis, you had said, are we testing the communications? Are we testing the reunification or family notification? Again, the active assailant work group is moving toward changing that language. We're not reunifying, we're notifying, right? Because not everyone is going to be unified. So I think where we're going, at least our groups, is our recommendations continue to be tactical training, tactical exercising is different than what we should be putting our students and our staff through to avoid some of the concerns about exercise. I think your question was specifically exercise fatigue and or trauma that might be the students and or the staff encounter. So I think the other key piece is somebody else had mentioned the whole community as part of the planning for the exercises. You can't just decide. I can't turn around today and say, guess what, we're going to do an evacuation exercise with this group right now if I haven't done any planning to prepare for them, right? The same goes true for these. If we don't include an entire community of planning, which means potentially Department of Disabilities, mental health services, education, law enforcement, We need to bring all of the whole community together, parents potentially, especially if we're talking about a family notification center portion of the exercise. So it is training on the plan, it is planning for the actual exercise or the drill, and including the whole community. And I think that's the best way to make the most effective exercises for our kids.
Okay, I
and
think
for our schools.
communication is a big part of that too. A lot of the calls that we get are from parents and others that say, "Oh, I didn't know that this was happening today at this time." So I think the plan should include a clear communication protocol as well.
How to make those notifications, yeah.
Yeah, and I noticed that you're going to have some products coming up in February and April, and then again in July. So if we could invite you to come back to update us when those products and research is complete, we can be more informed. And then what I'd like to do, Kate, is have you come and talk to superintendents so that we can make sure that loop is closed with the schools.
I don't want to take any more of the subcabinet time, but we can cover the kind of where we see our product going.
That would be
and
great.
if you want to provide some feedback. So in place of a large plan, in case you didn't gather, I'm not a big fan of those, we're going to make this more of an interactive web-based solution. So what that means is it's very focused on the end user, since this is a whole community issue. So it will be a web page that if you are a school system that is trying to write a plan and train or exercise, you'll be able to go to the web page and it will take you based on what your role is to the right part of the document and the right resources. So you can make the best, use what's best for you. So there won't be a plan per se that gets released. There will be a lot of content in various places on this web page. So that way, what we don't want is maybe the janitor that is also tasked with building safety to look at this product and immediately become discouraged and then go back to just doing an exercise, to skip the whole planning and training. So to make it scalable based on who the end user is that's going to be using the information. So that's what we are planning on doing with help from Do It upstairs. They're working with us to try to design that site that will live under maryland.gov, but open to feedback on if you see any challenges or think that's a good idea.
Just want to make sure I understand. Are you suggesting that, like, you're going to say to folks, you need to have a plan that's going to be kind of unique to you, but it's got to have these things in it? Is that what I'm understanding?
Correct. So it works with everybody else's. So a plan that, the plan for this building is different from the plan for the building next to it, but that it will work with the way that Air Force responders in Maryland will be coming in and the resources that we have available to, do family notification, family assistance, and all of the different aspects of it. So Air Resources will complement their plan, and we'll do as much of that as for them as possible with templates and that type of thing.
I did want to, if I can have a follow-up.
Certainly, please.
When you're putting together, like, the plan that will be unique to each person, you obviously have certain criteria. How, if this is something your group would do, so when things change, when people say, you know what, used to be a kid just walked in the front door, now we're noticing something different, how do you make it dynamic so you can change as...
It's a good question, actually. It kind of set me up. So it actually it set me up for success. So the good part is that rather than updating an entire plan, we can update a specific area. So that way we can go in and adjust just that one piece as these things evolve. Every incident, obviously the threat is evolving based off of what they're learning. They're reading the after actions just like I am. So that will allow our team, our planning and preparedness team, to adjust things as we learn from incidents and not have to have revision 3.2.16 every time an incident occurs.
Being a longtime school person, I have this visual of all the bookcases and manuals we have stacked on them. And, and it's, literally they're, this wide, and you've got to pull them out and figure out which section you need to be in. So I think the model you describe is much better, and certainly, hopefully, will be more user-friendly, and certainly in the 21st century. We don't want to create more of those books that no one looks at.
Right.
I got a ton of them still in my so.
Thank you.
Travis, somebody alluded to this earlier, but also with the website, one of the things we talked about last week at the work group meeting was that portions of it may be behind a firewall. Not everything.
Well, I
Protected.
assume that.
Yes.
Yeah, that was
So-
good. Yeah, that was a really good point that I missed. So, yeah, we're not obviously giving the keys to the castle to
Exactly.
anybody.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much. It was really a good discussion and certainly has alleviated some of my concerns. Bill, how about you?
No, that sounds great, because I wanted to be much more organic, working with
Right.
the community kind of process and recognizing that what may be appropriate for a senior in high school is not going to be appropriate for a
Exactly.
five-year-old.
Well, and I thank you for bringing it up to our attention because I think it was in the back of everyone's mind, but we hadn't articulated it as well as you did. So thank you, and thank you, gentlemen, for your discussion
Thank you.
today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, just to clarify, we do have a quorum, and we are going to go back to the parts of the agenda that we have moved forward from. And are there any additions to the agenda? Just let me double check. I don't think there are, but I wanted to double check. All right, could we have a motion to approve the November 18th minutes?
So moved.
Do we have a second? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We're now going to go back to the additional supporting documentation from the grants that we reviewed at our last meeting.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Can we jump up to the SRO grant coverage
Oh, yes,
discussion?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So if you recall, at the last subcabinet meeting, I gave you a sort of a read-ahead material for this agenda topic. Here's the concern. The SRO adequate coverage grant, the way it's worded and the way the calculations are, it is not clear whether or not it can be used as a hiring grant. So the conversation that I've been having with both the local school systems and the local law enforcement agencies is capacity. So the concern from the local law enforcement agency, the idea would be they would move an officer off of patrol, put them into a school, and use the SRO grant to pay for that, the one that they moved off of patrol now. The funding that was originally paying for them would now go to hire someone new. So that sounds great. That is definitely supported by the center. And I know it's something we discussed early in the development of the notice of funding. The other scenario that was supported is the using it for overtime funding. There are school systems, Kent in particular, getting about $36,000. There's no way that they could hire an individual for that. So that would just be used for overtime coverage to support adequate coverage. The third scenario that they're proposing is they would like to be able to use it for hiring new officers because they do not have the capacity to be able to pull somebody off the street. They don't have enough personnel to pull somebody off the street and put them in a school while they then go back and put somebody else through the academy and through training to get into a school. So the request is that the subcabinet needs to consider is they would like to use the SRO grant, hire an individual, put them through training to be an officer, then when they're fully trained and now law enforcement officers, put them on patrol and basically swap them out funding-wise with a seasoned patrol person that they would then put in the school. So they are now not requesting
Okay, that's
to
different.
put the new person in. They're requesting to put this individual who would be sort of a funding swap, right? So they would take somebody who was funded through this source and now funded through
Do
the
you have a
SRO.
timeline for that third scenario?
It's going to take at least a year,
Okay,
if not longer, for them to be hired,
right.
put through the process. So quite frankly, for this year, I don't see anybody being able to do that before
Right.
July 1. So this conversation is really about
Forward.
July 1 forward. So I'll leave it.
Well, what do folks think about that?
The swap?
Well, the third scenario, because it's a swap, but it is a delayed swap.
It's a delayed
Of
swap.
a year.
It would be a year without any additional coverage in the school system.
chalk it up to capacity building. I mean, and these things don't happen overnight. I mean,
Correct.
and I think it accrues to the school system's benefit to have an experienced officer rather than a rookie. So those two things count for it. I'm just wondering about from a county level budgeting standpoint. In other words, let's suppose that we did this in 8 or 10 school systems. We really, it's certainly not intended that we're going to pay for this person in perpetuity, are we?
So the statute is written that $10 million will be included in the governor's budget every year.
I understand that, but...
But it is not a guarantee.
But the things that we do, all I'm saying is if we want to go with making option 3 possible, I think if we approve this for a certain county, we ought to notify the school system and the county government that we're doing this in order to assist them in building capacity. But when that person gets their diploma, they're paid for by the local government, just the way any other police officer would be. I still think this would be a big help in building capacity, but otherwise, we're going to end up funding portions of police departments and sheriff's departments all over the state with essentially grant money.
What I think, and I agree with everything you said, but what I think carrying it one step further is we may be enabling them by that third option, because ultimately, as the senator points out, they could drag their feet in terms of capacity for their own department. And I guess what I don't want to see is that I think allowing the swap should be the end of what we do as opposed to adding a year to it, is all I'm saying.
Right.
Because it gives the appearance that we're okay with no coverage to that school. And I don't think we, as a safety cabinet, can stand in that stead.
So not option 3, but option 1, which is an immediate swap,
I think that's fine.
which also funds a person,
Right.
right?
But I think that's okay, because we're not talking about waiting a year to do it,
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps that guy never comes back in. I mean, I don't know what could happen, but a year's a long time to allow that.
So there is some arguments from some of the school systems and local law enforcement agencies that they will not be able to spend that amount in overtime. So if they can't hire, right, they can't do the immediate shift, they will not be able to spend that total amount that they're allocated for their individual school
But
systems.
how many systems does that really impact besides Ken? 'Cause
No,
everybody else is-
so I mean specifically, so we'll speak specifically about one county. So Frederick in particular has agreed that the city sheriff, or sorry, that the city police will be the one to take I think it's $480,000 is their total allocation for Frederick. The idea would be that they could hire a couple of additional new law enforcement officers, then within a year, or potentially longer, get them into, swap them out and get the seasoned officers into two schools which are currently being covered by the sheriff's office, which would then free up 2 individuals at the sheriff's office to give them more capacity. So the question is really, their concern is $480,000, they can't spend that in a year on overtime.
But why can't they hire someone and do the swap?
Can I?
Sure.
Having been in that management position when I was chief in Centerville, to do a background takes up to 4 months. You then have when academy is available, you have 6 months. So right away, if you hire somebody and the academy is available, that's a year out of the way right there. They then come out of the academy, they're at minimum 4 more months riding with a field training officer to be able to work on their own. So you're looking at least a year and a half before somebody is put through the hiring process, put through the academy, and then able to work on their own before you can swap that person out. So 18 to 20 months is a time frame realistic you're looking at to be able to swap a brand new person for the older person that wants to change and wants to work with the kids in the school.
And so they don't have enough officers to do the overtime by shifting them around between the sheriff's office and the city officers?
There is, they could potentially.
Frederick is a big place.
They could potentially spend it in overtime, but that would not build capacity, right? It would not put a new SRO in a school. It would put adequate coverage, which means a different officer each
Right.
day, potentially not building those relationships.
And is this the only county that's asked for this?
This is the second one that's come to us.
What's the other county?
Cecil was the other that had a similar
I don't
request.
understand why everybody else can do it, or if they haven't thought through it, I don't know.
Well, there's no doubt about the delay, the time delay. I mean, I experienced the same thing with people that inspect nursing homes and everything else. They have to go through the training, yeah, and it takes about a
Everything's
year,
not quick.
maybe a year and a half to get somebody who is actually capable of going out and doing it. So, you gotta have a plan, and it really, it's either a school system plan, or if you're using the local police department, it's a local law enforcement plan, how they're going to build capacity to be able to accomplish this.
I know for the school, for the deaf, they had a hard, I mean, they went to the troopers, to
Yeah.
Frederick Sheriffs, and Frederick City Police. I mean, it took them 3 tries to get someone to agree to do this.
Yeah.
Well, I just wonder if they're talking to each other, because it doesn't have to come from one or the other. It can be a plan that is
Yes.
with all law enforcement, not just the city versus the sheriff or the county.
Yeah, and I was sitting with both the city police as well as
Okay.
the sheriff, and the school system was there as well.
This is probably splitting hairs, but the other thing is that they're asking for us to pay the full freight, right?
For the individual?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We can make
Which is allowable. So
We-
if another school system or county or law enforcement agency shifts somebody over, the way the funds can be used is to fund the entire individual,
Right.
assuming that there's enough in their
I mean,
allocation.
you could make a partial grant, which would be a contribution towards the solution of this problem, but not a total solution. And then it would leave it up to the school system and the police department to work it out. That certainly beats a sharp stick in the eye, at least you got partial funding. But I think once you are actually identifying and funding officers, then I think we've taken on a new
Role.
dimension here, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I don't think that's what was intended.
Did we have a chance to check with the colonel to see what his viewpoint on this was, or?
Did not. I was hoping you would be here today.
I'd like to delay this one more meeting.
Okay.
And discuss it again when we have the colonel available.
Sure.
And just let's all think about this, think this through a little bit.
Yep.
And what the unintended consequences may be versus the good qualities of
Yes.
this being allowed. And let's just think about it one more
And
time.
we will put together the 3 scenarios
Yes,
for you,
okay.
so it's very clear what we're talking about and what
Right.
the
And who
requests
pays
are.
for what, and all that kind of stuff.
2 out of 3
Yeah.
ain't
And the
bad.
timelines.
I mean,
No.
you got two things that are
Yeah.
functional and don't take us too far afield
That's
from what
what I
our
think.
Right.
core
But let's-
mission is. The other one, I think, we jump into another meadow, so.
Right.
Understood. We'll do that for
All right,
January.
Thank you
Yep.
very much. Okay, so now we'll go back, and Dino, you want to take us through the additional information we received from the different counties that we postponed from the last meeting?
Yes, ma'am. Baltimore County. The first question you wanted additional information on was details on the breakdown of responsibilities of the contractual project administrator. Let me find them here. The contract administrator with 40% effort devoted to coordinating activities associated with the grant, including organizing travel, accommodation for selected speakers, securing venues for training, conferences, ordering grant-related event food, and filling out paperwork related to each of those responsibilities. 40% effort completing paperwork to pay stipends and speaker fees associated with the grant-funded projects. For the Stop the Bleed training alone, a total of 1,200 people will require stipends to complete the program. 20% of their effort will be ordering the various supplies that are required for the projects, including curricula, supporting materials, and equipment. The other question that was there was the document translation. They pulled that and they would like to do a video training product development, developing video content replacement and translation services. That would entail threat assessment, training, active shooter training, crisis response recovery, visual weapon screening, school intruders, school violence identifying and addressing, student mental health, emergency response planning, building their plan, emergency response planning, implementing their plans, terrorism awareness response, and incident command system training.
So given what we just talked about, is that a good use of $50,000? I'm just asking you to think about that. Because that training is talking about all users, not training for first responders, correct? And it sounds to me like they just, after we said no for the translation, they created a whole nother scenario what they're going to use the money for, quite frankly.
Well, one of my concerns is that, I mean, they say they're going to make videos one time. That suggests they think they're going to use this 5 or 10 years from now. I don't think it's going to be static like that.
Right. I agree. And I'm also still concerned about the billboard,
Me too.
$10,000.
15.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
And I look at their explanation, like this is like the legal definition of a bald assertion. You know, we've got crime and we've got low attendance, so therefore low attendance is causing the crime. And if we have the billboards and
What's that term, Bill? I like that.
a bald assertion.
Bald
Bald
assertion.
assertion. I have to remember that. I can use that. I think I can use that.
Not
In
my
my
head,
daily,
bald
work. Well, does someone want to make a motion not to approve that, since we have concerns?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All right, what are we going to do about the contracted project administrator? This is, again, the same scenario we had last month. I don't see any difference in this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that they threw in some more detail about the responsibilities, but I think the responsibilities cross over between financial grants management and program management. In other words, the execution of the projects themselves.
I agree. All right, so I'm seeing a nonverbal motion.
I'm just saying that we're trying to take this $10 million and put it where it'll do the most good, and they're
Trying to spend it somehow.
yeah, they're trying to spend it feathering their bureaucratic nest. Somebody's got to be able to do this. I mean, we're not offering this stuff turnkey where you're going to have a school safety program and we're going to fund it. This is categorical stuff to help people get the mission going. So I think if we get over there, we're going to have to ask the governor for more money because it won't go, our $10 million won't
Go
go
that far.
And the subcabinet has not asked for a match either from the
No.
locals, so
Right.
that's
That's
important
the
to
other thing.
remember.
So could you phrase that into a motion? 'Cause it sounded like one to me.
Yeah, I move we disapprove the project administrator or whatever it's called.
Okay.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions. So in essence, we have excluded all the Baltimore County funding
Okay.
that's been redefined.
Mid-translation, is that it?
It changed
The
it.
vote?
Well,
Video
that's
training.
what it was. They took the
Video training.
translations
That's right.
and made it into a school video
Okay.
program.
Right.
All right, Cecil County.
Cecil County.
Okay. Did they vote on the videos?
Yes.
They did vote to approve the videos?
No. No. So the question is, was there an actual vote for the video portion? Do you
That
want
was the
to?
first two.
Yes.
Oh, so it was
We
videos
did
and
together.
billboards together?
You
Yes.
Okay.
denied all
Thank you.
three.
Yes.
Correct. Oh, Cecil, I've got it.
Cecil County, Enforce 911 at $40,000. They requested additional information. They provided supporting documentation. There is nobody else in Maryland currently using this system. There is somebody in Virginia that they know of, as well as the northeast part of the United States. Their local emergency 911 center, this was based on the recommendation of the Sheriff's Office, and the Emergency Services Dispatch worked with them in developing processes for implementing this notification system, so they'll be working hand in hand with their 911 center doing this. The text messaging component of the product is based on their research on the website, and then the component relying on next generation 911 used in the future. It does have phone, text, and email capabilities. The company will work with them to integrate that into the universal state system as needed when such a system is up and running.
So again, that's something I would love to have the Colonel's feeling on, because if you remembered our last meeting, he had not heard of any of that.
Right.
And so could we delay looking at CISO until next month when the Colonel can be here, please?
Okay.
Does anybody have any concerns about waiting on that one?
No.
Okay, thank you. We move on to Carroll County.
Are we doing both parts for CISO? Because there was the alert.
Well, that's the other one he didn't know about as
Oh, okay.
well. So I think we should just wait for the whole thing instead
Just talk
of,
about it before, that's fine.
no, instead of splitting it up, let's
Okay.
wait and, again, take time to look at the additional stuff that they supported, their
To table
application.
the whole
with,
thing.
And then hear the Colonel, and then maybe we can make a better informed decision.
Carroll County, the at-risk conferences are $39,411. They provided information, and the conferences are focused on evidence-based programs and strategies that educators can use to help at-risk students experience success in school. Conference attendees will learn about evidence-based programming to address school climate, bullying, discipline, social-emotional learning, and supporting students through a trauma-informed lens. Facilitators of student support, PPWs, and staff psychologists. These staff work directly with the individual students and families and can provide support to the student level as well as the school and system level. Attendees will be required to share the evidence-based strategies and programs they learn about the conference with their schools as well as student sports department, student services department as a whole in order to implement the strategies system-wide.
So no specifics about what these conferences are, where they are, when they are.
Yeah, so in the original one, so the last meeting, there's one in November and one in June. They're in Nevada. Both are in Nevada. The price is about $2,000 per individual, which for a trip to there, that is about an average for a conference for that price. So it's just a question of whether or not using school safety, Safe Schools Fund funds to fund that is an appropriate use of those funds.
So open it up to thoughts on that.
Last time we talked about this, I think it was staff that said that these things would be too expensive to do ourselves, and it would be better off paying the freight to let them go to a bigger thing. There are only 2 places in Nevada that host these things. Reno and Las Vegas, so
Well,
I'm
that's,
just guessing.
yeah, that's true.
So but that's where the conferences are, that's where the conferences are. Gives me a little bit of, we got 6 million people in Maryland, and we've got lots of hotels and lots of venues, and if we're going to be doing this, maybe we ought to start organizing around some local and regional things that we can do on an ongoing basis. I mean, this is essentially a one-off, and maybe a very nice conference, but then that's where it ends. If you can get a little closer to home and do things on weekends or Friday afternoons or something like that, you might be able to get more people to come, and you can train and inform more people. So,
How many other counties have asked for this kind of funding, and have we agreed to it?
For conferences, we have approved conference trips for other school
Okay.
systems,
But-
both last year and I believe even this year we've done.
To Have we used that average cost figure before 2,000? Because that would fund about, what, 20 people?
What would fund about 20 people?
If you figure 39,000,
Oh,
40,000.
for this amount, yes.
Does
So
that
for a
seem-
trip from Maryland to the West Coast, Las Vegas area or Nevada area, it is approximately $2,000 between travel, registration,
Right.
hotel.
But I'm just wondering, in terms of the amounts that we have already approved, have we,
Have they been
have they
consistent?
been that much, I guess is what I'm saying?
So-
Have they been that expensive?
No, because they haven't all been to Nevada. Some have been shorter distances. We've approved some in Virginia recently, which those were much cheaper because they were drive time.
Because we could also use the old adage that we used when I was in Talbot County, and that is you don't go past the Mississippi River. You know, certainly gave you lots of other alternatives, even Florida or whatever, or, you know, Virginia, where a lot of these conferences are. I guess I would just like to do some more research and see, have we let people go that far and to those kinds of venues? Because that's a kind of perception thing. Even though we know that our people are great and they don't misuse that kind of thing, it's still a perception. If the governor would say, the senator and I, you know, why are you sending these people to Nevada or whatever? I'd like to be able to say it was really worthwhile.
Okay? Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. Is that okay with everybody if we just kind of check into that a little more?
I would. Did you want to?
Yeah, but I still say that what we should be about is facilitating that capacity here. I thought you were going to say you don't cross the chop tank, which is in Mississippi,
How would you get there?
but nevertheless, I just think that this is
it should be about
this
us.
is an ongoing thing, and maybe the 20 people that go in Baltimore County, they got to go back and they've got to make that investment at least 5 or 6-fold in training other people. But I still say we need some local training capacity so that we don't have to call the travel agent every time we need some training. And I think Maryland's a sophisticated enough state that you can put together the stuff, offer it here, and you have much more participation, much wider audience.
Well, like
and-
our summer program is,
Yeah.
well, you know, communicated and tons of people
Good point.
participate. We just trained 1,000 school resource officers. There's no state that has done anything like that.
Right.
So,
But we didn't do it in Las Vegas.
no.
If we could get maybe a couple, because I feel like I've asked about conference costs before, maybe get like a little breakout. so we
Yeah,
can
like
see.
a little chart, you know, maybe that would be a good idea. Okey doke. All right, so that is all that Carroll County had asked, or we had asked them to come back with. Howard County.
Howard County. Howard County's request was to the contractor to support their emergency operation plans updates at $146,000. Required a detailed work plan of what the contractor will be doing as well as the time and effort on the project. We'll add that Howard County probably had foresight when they put this in. Because what's due at the end of this coming up year is all the plans have to be done by everybody. However, they provided a work plan narrative, details their continuity of operations plan assigned to a contractor from the University of Maryland Center for Health and Homeland Security, CHHS. Started in July 2019. The contractor assigned from there is devoted 100% to Howard County's Office of Safety and Security to work on the work plan. They have a timeline of activities and who the personnel will be responsible to. They'll integrate their information from FY20 safety assessments to the parameters to revise current EOPs. So they're going to take what they did in their safety surveys and integrate that into their emergency operations plans, communicate with external stakeholders, use of software and other strategies within their system to coordinate EOP for the system and the schools. Mr. McNeil, the Director of Safety and Security, is the person this individual we're reporting to.
So I'll jump in quickly on the work plan that they submitted. Just note that it goes beyond the time frame of the grant. It goes beyond June 30th of this summer. So they will be doing additional work. So you may want to consider that if they...
So I have a question about supplementing versus supplanting, because when you were reading through this, it said that this work that CHHS began in July of 2019, so it is an already commenced project. Was that correct?
I think that there's their time plan, I don't think they've hired them yet. I think they were waiting for this
Okay.
funding.
Go ahead.
So just keep that in mind as you look through this work plan. There is time on this and additional projects beyond the end period of this grant. So that potential concern there is, are they going to then come back
For more.
beginning July 1? Or is there a, if this gets approved, do we say, that's it till June 30th?
Yeah, that goes all the way up to 22.
Right.
As you mentioned.
Can we clarify that with them? Can we ask them that?
So go ahead,
No,
Carol.
I was just going to say, can we ask for clarification on that?
So I think so their clarification is, we are going to fund this position to do these tasks through 2022.
So did any of the other counties use this model when they were trying to get their work done? I mean, I know Howard has a large
Yeah.
number of schools, but so does Montgomery, so does, PG, so does Baltimore City, Baltimore County, et cetera.
We have not received applications for the work on their plans themselves. We did, and you did approve funding for the survey evaluations for last year, both as part of Safe Schools Fund, including this year as well, but not for the update of their actual plans themselves.
It's sort of organic. I mean, it's something you gotta do. I supported the evaluations because I thought that was probably worth doing. We get our wagon in the ditch here shortly.
The question goes back to the
Along with the
personnel.
dead horse.
Good flogging.
The funding of personnel is really the ultimate, and I think for next
And
year,
it's a consultant too.
Yeah.
And I think they are prior, been an employee perhaps, but I don't know that for sure. It's a tough one. Carol, Bill, what do you think?
I always get a little leery whenever there is a contract with one of the institutes of higher education. I don't know why. There's something about the money kind of going back and forth between state agencies that, I don't know, just raises my eyebrow.
Which they really should do an MOU and not a contract
Well, right.
anyway, right?
Yes.
And that's what we do, which may be less expensive,
I thought,
so.
I don't do procurement, but I thought that some auditing office said, I don't understand these contracts between
Right.
government agencies like this.
Right.
The health department call them IAs.
Yeah. Right.
Is there any value, the educational institution that's doing this plan? I mean, it'd be great if we could multiply it 24 times, then you'd be getting some leverage on your money. But I guess they've only agreed to do Howard counties.
This is a really good question, because I'm wondering, I'm sorry.
No,
But,
that's,
I
I
mean,
think
are
you and I
they-
are on the same track.
Are they creating something? This is what
Yeah.
I think you're saying, because if they are, I mean, if they're creating something with money that we've given them, then I want us to be able to
Want
say,
something back.
and I want every school system in Maryland to be able to
Has
use
a
it for
benefit
free.
of it, yeah.
I would be curious about that too.
in other words, if they were going to develop a plan, could that plan then be a template used by other school systems? Is that?
Well,
What
that's
you-
half of it. The
Okay.
one thing, I don't know this school at all, but I have seen other institutes of higher education say, yeah, we built that for you, state of Maryland. Now we're going to sell it to the other 49 states and you don't get anything. So I guess I'd like to know a little bit about that.
So to answer the question about, are they existing, I think you asked? So they have plans in place. Every school in Howard County has their emergency plan. This is the update of that, as well as, the comment about the continuity of operations plan is probably not as good as it should be, and I would argue it's probably true across the state in government agencies, state and local. They could do better. So,
This is the paragraph that, listen to this. The work plan specifically details our work on our continuity of operations COOP plan assigned to our contractor, the University of Maryland Center for Health and Homeland Security. The Center for Homeland Health and Security started in July 2019 on several projects for us. This work will continue through June of 2020. In the event of renewed funding, the work will continue as it will go to fiscal year 2023 to complete all projects needed for the Maryland Center for Health and Homeland Security. Well, that's not Howard County. So it gets back to what you guys said earlier. Am I allowed to make a motion as the chair? I'm going to make a motion. I'm going to make a motion that we do not fund this.
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries. All right.
Can I say?
Yes.
There may be, and I just, in the interest of full disclosure, I'm a member of the Board of Regents, and I don't know anything about this,
Right.
this transaction. But if this is an ongoing thing, you may want, and it may not be this organization, but some organization that can give us some third-party information about all of the state stuff. We'd be
And that would be
buying
more-
it once
That would be
instead
more
of.
along the line of what Kate would do to
Yeah.
get
Well,
together this
both
information.
ours and the work of
Exactly.
the grant
Right.
between Department of Ed and MEMA, who are also working on
Same
updated
thing.
emergency plans, and, yeah.
Right, so let's focus there.
Right.
And then that may be worth developing an MOU and putting some money towards it.
Right.
And that's worthy of our money if we do
Right,
something
I think
like
that's
that.
very smart, and if that could be part of our response, that we think it's great, but we want to focus our on statewide.
On the whole
and
state.
not
Otherwise,
just one.
we're gonna get 23 more requests.
Yeah, I see that coming next year.
You see that coming. I mean,
And there is, just like the Department of Ed, U.S. Department of Ed does for grants to MSDE, or when we have sub-grantees, there can be language requiring attribution and specifying the intellectual property of anything that the subcabinet would award.
Which is what you put in your MOU.
Right.
Yes.
This sounded like whatever it was
Up
was
front,
already
so there's no
done.
confusion.
Right,
belongs
like
to us.
who gets it in the
Belongs to
end.
us.
Yep.
Perfect, all right, let's go on to, where are we?
Ms. Georges?
Prince George's.
Prince George's County. Question of the project coordinator at $43,200. The additional information requested. They did stipulate it was at 20 hours per week at 36 weeks. The position would not be requested or funded after completion of the project. Their duties, responsibilities for that project coordinator to manage the day-to-day program operations is highlighted in the proposal narrative, interacting with program staff to ensure goals and objectives for the grant are being pursued and achieved, working with PG County Purchasing Procurement Office to ensure mental health providers are approved as vendors for processing of payment services, corresponding mental health providers and schools to ensure delivery of services, establishing protocols for reporting progress for services developed by mental health providers, monitoring all program-related activities to ensure effective implementation, working with assigned administrative assistant, which includes collaboration on program-related expenditures, processes, and problem resolution, ensuring timely and accurate processing of all invoice and payment documents, ensuring grant compliance by adhering to report deadlines, maintaining accurate and current records of key attributes of grant initiatives to include purchases and training, working closely with various cross-functional grant support staff and teams in addressing concerns and implementation of issues, providing required documents during the grant period, quarterly and closeout reports, and Prince George's County Public Schools lessons learned documentation, performing other related duties assigned or delegated by the mental health coordinator.
Still sounds like a grants coordinator to me.
Administrator.
Administrator, yeah.
They really ought to get some sort of reward if they could get all that work done for $43,000.
That's why I was laughing. In 20 hours a week.
20 hours a week.
What's your pleasure?
Move disapproval.
All right, now, do you want to, a question, do we want to do anything with the second assignment stipend? I'm still wondering how $577 does that. Is that really the amount?
That is really the
That's
amount.
the amount. They define it, second assignment defined is funding required for their administrative procedures to compensate employees performing work outside their standard position requirements. Specifically, a second assignment is additional time work that is not part of an employee's defined areas of responsibility. 10 and 11-month employees are eligible to work second assignments for specific special projects when needed and when pre-approved, only when those additional hours are not directly related to or not part of their regular duty day.
It's basically the cost for them to be a co-instructor for the youth mental health first aid class, which is a one-day class.
All right, well, good, that explains it, because
Yeah.
I was going to approve it just
Yeah,
based
it's
on
the second- yeah.
being very frugal, and I thought that was a great, if they could get all that done with $577.
So it is for these individuals outside of hours
Okay,
to
so it's
instruct
only-
a specific class, youth mental health
Okay.
first aid.
All right, so would you all consider amending your motion to disapprove of the first, but approve of this $577?
It's fine with me.
I agree.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. Do we, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Caroline County.
Caroline County. They wish to reallocate the funds from Fly Sense, purchase additional, and install 18 bus cameras.
Apologies,
So they said they don't want Fly Sense, or we
They
said?
requested to remove the Fly Sense from their grant
Okay.
request. And they would like to additionally use that money, those funds to purchase and install 18 bus cameras.
Cleverly anticipated a negative on the vape detectors, and very adeptly decided that they needed cameras on buses, so.
And the overview sheet to clear up, there is a typo, so it should say Caroline County wants to replace,
Yes.
not Cecil County. We are talking about Caroline County.
Got it. So, but they still have on there the Social Sentinel, which we also had questions about.
So they pulled Social Sentinel and they you pulled Fly Sense, you denied that.
Okay, all right.
They pulled Social Sentinel
Oh,
and they
that's the
combined
one
those
to do
funds
the bus
to do
cameras.
this.
Yes. I
All right.
apologize.
That's all right, it was just a little confusing. Okay,
I move to approve.
all right. We have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
I think it was Secretary Beatty, but,
Yeah, that's all right, that's all right.
okay.
She's
She
much
was
more
quick.
soft-spoken than I am.
Yes.
And smart.
All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, motion carries, excellent.
All right.
Garrett County.
Garrett County. Question with the SRO offices and safe rooms. The subcamp requested details on the safe rooms and reviewing. They're adding additional SROs into elementary schools, so they want to create offices for those SROs at the Accident Elementary School, Friendsville, and Garrettsville Elementary Schools. The Route 40 Elementary School, the Youth Glades Elementary School, and an office at Southern High School for the SRO. The safe rooms at Southern High School that they have requested about. There are 6 rooms strategically located in the school will be equipped as a, quote, safe room, unquote, during an active shooter event. Select staff will be assigned to each room to notify the appropriate 911 center first responders, monitor school cameras, notify occupants in the school of the location and movement of the active assailant, and provide evacuation information. And they go on to provide the following equipment we need for each safe room will be a large monitor for security camera operations, mounting bracket, wiring feed, electrical feed, a computer to run the camera software, remote wireless keyboard, mouse, voice over internet, phone, wiring, junction box, access control hardware, locks for securing the interior doors, panic hardware for notifying the 911 center, and their system IT maintenance support for installation, training, professional development for administrators and key staff to effectively operate that safe room.
So there is no indication that this is for students. The indication
Or
is,
staff.
or
For the police
key
department.
It's
staff.
like a security room. I don't know
It
why
is.
it's called a safe room.
Well, I would, and I don't know, I haven't been to Garrett this year yet, but, most of the school systems that I've visited have these kinds of video systems right in the front office, and they have their officers, checking them from time to time. They're associated with, you can get panic buttons that go right to 911. They're very cheap. So I think, in my opinion, this is a little overkill. Again, kind of what we talked about before, and it doesn't sound like it's money that, it sounds like creating, we don't want these people in those rooms, we want these people around with kids and walking the buildings and.
Well, I'm not familiar with Southern High School. Is this a huge campus with multiple
No,
buildings?
no,
Or
it's a
small?
small high school. No, it's a small high school.
Okay.
So,
Maybe they might be thinking that they could protect a major portion of their enrollment by having 6
but I don't think they mean that for the kids to come into these
No, right.
rooms. I think that was our original thought.
Right.
They mean to create a room to surveillance the whole entire campus and then call 911 or whatever
Which
And they want
acts,
6 rooms, which is what I'm really puzzled
in
by.
different schools.
Oh, okay, I'm reading, this says
Yes.
Southern High School
Southern.
safe room
Yeah,
6, so I assume
right.
it's.
They made a mistake, but
I
I
see.
think that when they outlined the first part, it
Oh,
was
okay.
6 different locations.
That's what it says. I think they.
yeah, so there's outfitting
Oh, I mean,
SRO
offices
offices
and
and
safe
safe
rooms.
rooms. So it's a
All right,
combined
well, then I
amount.
read that incorrectly, I apologize.
So it's just this high school.
But are you sure it's for 6 schools and not just the high school? The way I read it, it's for Southern High School.
For the safe room side.
Yeah.
But again, there is nothing to
Doesn't look
indicate
like
that they're
kids
putting
going
kids
there. No.
being put in there.
No, so it's a,
Not that they wouldn't, but it doesn't clearly
No.
state that they would put students in there.
I have a question. If they just listed out this equipment as something that they wanted to purchase for the school rather than calling it this, would we?
For the safe room?
Yeah. So if they need a monitor, a large monitor.
well, it's
because
like I
they
said
don't
earlier,
currently
or if
have
they
one.
need that security
Right.
system, which they list
Right.
here, I'd be fine with approving
And
that.
that's
So
what I'm
maybe we
thinking.
need to let them know that they need to, we are not going to equip safe rooms or SRO offices.
Okay.
But if they need surveillance systems, that we could potentially look at that from that standpoint.
Delivery for Maine and Walker.
And here.
Probably check next door, I don't know. Did you all order lunch for us?
Was it lunch?
Yeah.
We should have said yes.
Finally, you're here, I was waiting.
We've been waiting.
I'm sorry, too honest.
What are we turned away for? Is it going?
Wait, let's ask them what it is first.
Yeah, what it is.
All right, so we will go back to them on that.
Yeah, because
If that's the-
because if, like Carol said, if they need the systems that I'm thinking about, which is
Sure.
giving them access to the whole building with cameras, that's different than creating one room as a safe room.
Right.
I think, I'm looking at their explanation, and now I'm seeing that the 6 rooms are in the first 6 schools that are listed, but then they said Southern High School, they want 6 rooms in the school. So if they could at least clarify and stop using the word safe room, because to me, that
Yes.
means that's a room for every kid in the school.
Right, and that's just not true. And we don't want to fund offices either.
Yep.
So we'll keep that on push back and not take a vote until we see what.
Got it.
come up with.
This one?
Okay. All right. So,
One more.
do we have another one?
We have 2 big ones
Oh,
now.
that's right, hold on. I gotta go to my next sheet. All right, you want to do St. Elizabeth's?
St. Elizabeth School, their request for the Safe Schools Grant Fund. Project 1 is ALICE training, be the e-learning support and maintenance of the program and e-learning user licenses, K through 12. They're going to be getting 220 licenses at $12.99 per license. So their request for that project is $3,107.80. Project number 2, Raptor Visitor Management System, installation of scanner, barcode reader, printer, annual license software, one-time activation database fee, training, and blank cartridges. The cost for that whole project is $2,098. They're only eligible for $5,000. They understand that, and the overage will be coming out of their available allocation of their operating funds of $205.80. So only a total of $5,000 is requested, and that's what their approved allocation would be.
I would move to approve unless we want to discuss. I move to approve.
It's $5,000, let it rip.
All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
I apologize, Madam Chair, I didn't hear who made the motion, and
That was Bill
Got it.
and a second from Carol.
great, thank you.
Okey-doke. Baltimore City.
Baltimore City Schools. Project number 1, expansion of their outpatient mental health centers, funding outpatient mental health center services to an additional 13 Baltimore City schools. These will be subcontracted to 4 identified vendors within the city. They're asking $200,000 for that project. Project number 2, school survey evaluation program. Build upon the initial survey program by hiring a contractor to modify and improve the current survey tool in use, assess outcomes of evaluations, provide electronic report for each facility, and train city schools police on the use of the assessment tools so they can then do the assessments in the future themselves. They're requesting $200,000 for that project. Project number 3, Safe Passage Safe Community Program. This program entails working with identified community organizations within 2 communities to provide and publicize safe walking and transportation routes to schools within those communities, and coordinate members of Safe Passage support teams who will be along the identified routes to enhance safety to and from schools. 7 schools will be supported by this assistance within these 2 communities. They're requesting $100,000 for that program. Project number 4, school safety transfer process improvements. Review and update of the school safety transfers process with assistance from an outside consultant. Outcomes expected are guidance for receiving schools welcoming students to the community, development of a safety transfer, process-specific tool to tailor needs of transferring student to the new school, and streamlining communication and reporting requirements, and reviewing and improving documentation system for safety transfers. They're requesting $50,000 for that project. Project number 5, metal detector training of 200 staff on use, legal precedents, Fourth Amendment considerations, customer service during use of metal detectors for screening entry into schools. The Baltimore City school system is expanding its program to all secondary schools within the city. They're requesting $50,000 for that training. Project number 6, engagement of multilingual families in safety considerations, training by vendor district office staff in developing strategies for effective communication with multilingual families. Training will increase awareness of school staff on issues facing multilingual families, as well as assist in identifying safety concerns of the families and addressing their concerns more effectively. They're requesting $10,000 for that project. Project number 7, emergency medical supplies. Funds will be used to purchase 20 automatic external defibrillators with carrying case and supplies, and stop the bleed supplies and materials. The stop the bleed materials are $9,608. The 20 AEDs, $29,110 for a total of $38,718 in that project.
Whoa.
Where do we start?
Start with you, Senator.
Winner.
I don't know. I'm always skeptical when things are round numbers.
Oh, good, me too.
I just do, because, the only thing that isn't round numbers in this is the emergency supplies, and I don't even know whether that's a good price for 20 AEDs.
It is.
It is,
Is
it's
it-
probably a good price.
Okay, all right.
Having just purchased one.
Okay, well, and that's the most accurate part of this. The rest of this, I think, is,
Yeah, there's no vendors described. There's,
no breakdown at all.
it says external vendor. The only thing in the mental health piece is they've listed some of the providers, which
Right.
I was curious about the Villa Maria, because that's a residential treatment center. And I don't know that, I would really like to make sure we're not placing kids there with this funding.
That they're doing outpatient
Exactly.
type, yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So that would be a concern. I would just need, and if you look at the number of schools that it will serve for $200,000, we're talking about 9, 10, 13 schools. I just think there needs to be more details, because the oversight is provided by the Director of Home and Hospital, which makes me more concerned because of students with disabilities being placed by sometimes by home and hospital folks. So I just want to, I think we need to clarify that for, I know they've broken down its treatment services on page 3, but, you know, it's just very generic of what they're going to do. I certainly know there's a need for mental health services in every one of our school systems, but I think they need to have a better plan than what is articulated in here for those schools, and why those schools and not other schools. I don't think it's clear unless they have coverage in the other schools. So that would be my concern on the mental health piece. And then we're back to the school safety evaluation thing again. This is the same thing we just discussed, correct?
Yeah, the only difference here is the way they've worded this, to me, is this is more on building capacity. So they've done the evaluations, they're gonna have a vendor come in, look through what they did, update the tool that they're gonna be using, and then train everybody on how to use it. And assuming that they don't come back and then ask to fund people to do this again, right? If the idea for this is that will then create a self-sustaining program for their evaluations, then I think that would be something I would personally support. But if we're talking about they're going to come back in a year and say, oh, we need $200,000 again to do safety evaluations, that's where I would have a concern.
Yeah, it's number 5 in their point there is to train school police staff on use of the new assessment tool to conduct future safety assessments and evaluations.
Right. Yeah, I just think, again, it's that round number that bothers me, and that maybe we could ask for more detail about how they procure this, who is the consultant.
Yeah, so the one concern I have about that, or question I have about that, is if we have to be careful of them having the work already happening now, right? Supplanting versus supplementing.
Right.
They may not have a contract yet, so they may be waiting for the funding to get the contract, but I think they could certainly get quotes and/or potentially have, if they haven't done.
Local school systems can do a lot more than we can do at the state level, so they can.
So they should at least be able to provide us with a few vendors that they're looking at.
Right.
Okay.
And then the Safe Passage and Safe Community Program. Anybody have any thoughts about that?
I don't know, when I first read the snippet, I thought this was a little more about, I don't know, like painting crosswalks or something like that, but there's a heavy emphasis on outreach, which I don't understand. So maybe I'm missing something, but it just seems like a lot of money to.
Not for the in the school, but it's to getting to school and
To and
getting home
from.
from school.
identifying publicized safe walking and transportation routes.
And there is a heavy volunteer component to this, so it's the coordination of volunteers. So it is more on a program level than a single activity level.
For 2 communities, correct?
Correct. About 7 schools.
I guess if they could show us more specifically what they would use the 50,000 for, like itemize it or budget it somehow.
Okay.
Because it's just like we're going to give this community $50,000 and through volunteers and stuff, they're going to decide how to make it safer. I think it needs to be more school directed than,
Okay.
and engaging community, but not necessarily giving a community $50,000 of state money.
Sounds interesting.
It does, I mean, it sounds like,
Promising.
you know, I'd hate not to use some of this money to be innovative, but I think we need to be really careful
Yep.
about just handing people a check and then saying it's going to make a difference. What's the evaluation component? I'd like to know how they're going to know if this is successful or not. Because there's a lot of factors out there in terms of being safe when walking to and from school. We all know what those are. All right, again, the next one is for another consultant. And again, there's no detail.
I did ask about this program. It was explained to me that currently their school safety transfer process is haphazard, depending upon what area in the city they're trying to move a student to. It all depends on the interpretation of the principal involved. They're trying to consolidate this program into one program, one policy, one process, so that when a student is moved for safety reasons, there basically will be a checklist of A, B, C, D right on down the line of what goes with the student, what the student needs when they get to their new school, and concerns that the
How
new
many
school.
students does this involve?
A lot of it has to do with individuals in the community who have witnessed events in the community, that because the perpetrators of those events know where the kids go to school, they're trying to move the kid for their safety.
I would like more detail.
Okay?
All right, and then the next one is the training for metal detectors.
All they were able to provide me was that they would be using Garrett Electronics Incorporated to do this training. I guess that's the manufacturer of the metal detectors.
This was the one where I could see where the money went. I did the math, it was like $250 a person.
You turn it on, and you ask people to put the stuff in the dish, and then they walk through, and if they buzz, you ask them to come back and take some more stuff off.
Are you the consultant they've hired?
I'm just saying, I've gone through enough of them, and I think I know what the drill is, and I don't think this equipment is that hard to.
So there is a little more to it than just the actual walking through the system itself. There is the training piece also covers how you deal with the individuals that you're interacting with, right? So as far as where you're going to scan, how you're going to scan, how you're going to interact with them, especially as it relates to students. I would think there's a little more.
Is
And
Baltimore
legalities
City the
involved.
only school system in Maryland that's using metal detectors at present?
I believe so.
But there's no research to show that they are preventative of school shooting incidents?
No.
Is there?
No.
Curious. I don't know. I don't know that the school Center for School Safety can approve something associated with them knowing what we do about the research. But that's my only opinion on that.
I mean, if I had my way, I'd ask them to resubmit this with some detail. And even though they did tell you what you were going to get for your money, I'm still not so sure that I would approve of it. So, yeah.
Would a lesson plan be helpful, like sort of the training objectives? Okay.
Well, I don't know, Phyllis, I'm at a philosophical level here about the metal detectors.
Well, one question I did have is, what did you do before? I mean,
Well, they're adding them to all their secondary schools.
Right.
So
Okay.
they've got
They're
it in
increasing.
some, but not in all of them. So they're adding all of these new ones. Now, they're apparently have the money to pay for
Well, yeah,
them.
what did they
which
do
is-
before? Did they-
Which is surprising, but
Well, maybe they had the training, but they paid for it.
Maybe they did training. but-
Subsidized, or maybe, that would be a question.
Yeah, no, that's worth it, okay.
well, this is just a very vague application,
That's
just
what
to put it right out on the table.
Yes.
So, I would be okay in approving the emergency medical supplies, because I think that that's a need that every school system have the availability of those supplies.
Yep.
And that seems to me something we could approve, but the rest of it, I would agree with the team that we really need more information. So I'll make a motion to approve that piece of it, which is
$38,700.
$38,718.
Second?
All right, motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. All right,
Do we want to, did we talk about Project 6? Is there anything specifically that we want to add to this?
well, I think we're asking them to rethink all
The
of
whole
the
thing?
areas and
Okay.
giving us more detail.
Any of the trainings.
Okay, all right.
On all of those areas. Okey-doke. Well, I must say, we've been rather efficient again today. Ending before our prescribed time. Our next meeting will be here in the new year, January the 13th. And if there's no further business, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Second. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Everyone have a happy holiday and a safe holiday.
Yes.
Be careful today, I don't know what it's still doing today. Doing something out there, I think.
It is.